On a cold October morning in 1826, dock workers at George's Dock, Liverpool, recoiled from a stench so foul it could cut through the river fog. The smell was coming from 3 heavy casks labelled bitter salts bound for Edinburgh. When they opened the casks, Liverpool would never look at its dead the same way again. In the 1820s, Britain was desperate for bodies. Medical science was advancing rapidly, but the law lagged far behind. Surgeons were permitted to dissect only the corpses of executed criminals, and there was never enough of them. At that time, anatomy schools demanded bodies and used them to further their surgical knowledge. So in the shadows, a new profession flourished. They were called resurrection men, grave robbers and body snatchers. Liverpool, with its swelling population and crowded burial grounds, became fertile ground for their trade. On the evening of Monday, October the 9th, 1826, 3 massive casks were hauled from the Hope Street cellar and carted through Liverpool streets to George's Dock. Their destination was Edinburgh. The casks were labelled bitter salts. But when the sailors attempted to load the cargo the next morning, the stench was unbearable. Captain Walker ordered the casks to be opened. Inside one of them were human bodies. The authorities were summoned immediately, and the casks were taken to the dead house on Chapel Street. There, the full horror was revealed. 11 human bodies stuffed into the casks, packed tightly in salt. The police launched an investigation and traced the delivery to the back of number 8 Hope Street, now known as 47 Hope Street, and there stood a respectable home and place of learning. The Reverend James McGowan, a schoolmaster and minister, had built a boys' school behind his house, and beneath it lay a large stone cellar. In January of 1826, McGowan rented that cellar to a fellow Scotsman, John Henderson, who claimed he needed the storage space for his fish oil export business. Detective Robert Bowie arrived at the Hope Street property and questioned Reverend McGowan, who insisted he had no key to the cellar, but the police ignored his protests and officers smashed down the door, and what they found inside defied belief. 22 bodies, men, women and children, stuffed into sacks and barrels, hidden in the darkness of the cold cellar. The police surgeon examined the corpses. None of the bodies showed any signs of murder. They had all died naturally, some a few days ago, but others had died more than a week ago. One woman still had a thread tied around her toes, a burial custom meant to keep the feet together whilst buried in the grave. These people had been laid to rest, and then they were stolen. All evidence pointed to one place, St. Mary's Cemetery. Here, the poor, especially those who died in the nearby workhouse, were buried in large communal graves, up to 30 bodies at a time. The graves were often left open, sealed only by a heavy wooden frame secured with locks. Somehow the body snatchers had obtained a key. Under the cover of darkness, they removed the freshly buried dead and replaced the soil, leaving no obvious trace. 10 of the stolen bodies had come directly from the workhouse. The dead were some of the most vulnerable people in Liverpool. After the investigation, Reverend McGowan was cleared of any involvement. John Henderson, the man who rented the cellar, vanished and was never caught. The police had turned their attention to a lodging house at Caroline Court. The 3 men who had been staying there disappeared immediately after the bodies were found, and police believed they were the gang responsible for stealing the dead bodies. They couldn't hide forever, and one by one they resurfaced. James Donaldson was captured days later, and what was shocking is that the remaining 2, Peter McGregor and John Ross, both stayed in Liverpool and continued their trade. Twice they attempted to send bodies to Edinburgh, and on the 7th of November, McGregor was caught in the act of loading bodies onto a coach. 3 days later, John Ross was recognised by the carter who remembered him from the original shipment from Hope Street to George's Dock. The resurrection men operating from Liverpool to Edinburgh were rounded up and taken off the streets. Body snatching, unless accompanied by theft of valuables, was only a misdemeanour. Each man received 12 months in prison and a heavy fine. No punishment could undo what had been found beneath Hope Street. In the days that followed, St Mary's Cemetery was ordered to raise its walls and reinforce its defences. 6 years later, the Anatomy Act of 1832 finally changed the law, allowing donated bodies to be dissected legally. Due to this new law, the trade in stolen corpses slowly died out. But for a time, Liverpool supplied the country's highly respected surgeons with its dead. Beneath the streets we walk every day lie stories never meant to be told, graves reopened and bodies sold, and a schoolhouse cellar that once held 22 stolen souls. This true crime story happened in the now popular Hope Street in Liverpool. This was not legend, it was real.